And Rudy, let's talk about the side effects of those GLP-1.
So that is a very hot subject to talk about because, like everything, nothing comes without side effects. So most of the side effects of GLP-1 that we talk about are the short-term side effects because one of the main things that GLP-1s do, it delays gastric emptying, decreases your rate of digestion. So you get that full, that satiety feeling, and you don't eat as much. But because of that, GI symptoms like indigestion, constipation, nausea, sometimes vomiting can happen. But when done properly, if you're eating the right foods, you don't overeat, you don't eat fatty foods, you avoid alcohol as much as possible. In most cases, that can be mitigated or avoided. And then, so, there's a great saying in the US where they say, don't throw the baby with the bathwater, right? So although some things have side effects, there is a good way that we can use those tools and mitigate the side effects. So, and especially when I use the newer GLP-1, tirzepatide, that's way fewer side effects in my experience and in studies also versus semaglutide. So my strategy to help my patients, I tend to use tirzepatide more. I always start slow and I try to microdose. And I'm very big on lifestyle and behavior and nutrition support to help my patients do the right thing. And while we're doing this, it's not just how quickly you lose the weight, it's how quickly can you change your bad habits and establish new habits. So now let's talk about the possible long-term side effects of GLP-1. And one of the things that have been in the news recently is the possibility of the vision loss that you can see with GLP-1. So there was a recent article in JAMA Ophthalmology where neuro-ophthalmologists started doing a report and they found 9 cases of what is called NION, non-arteritic uh, non-arteritic ischemic optic neuropathy, which can be vision changes, even vision loss that can occur. They're not sure what it is, but it's usually a decrease of blood flow to the optic nerve. And they've seen 9 cases. Those were an association, not a causation. So they said that there were 9 cases of patients. I think they looked at 245,000 medical records, and they see 9 cases, and they saw those patients at some point took GLP-1. So there's a question mark whether GLP-1 can increase that risk. There was another registry of patients of GLP-1, and that was done in Europe, where they did not see that association. So the conclusion of that journal, JAMA Ophthalmology study, was we need to look at this. I'm going to tell you, in all my career, that 20 years, I've had maybe 3 or 4 patients who reported visual changes. Those were mostly on diabetic patients, and diabetic patients know that when their blood sugars fluctuate, usually their vision becomes blurry. So if I have a patient that reports to me that they have vision issues or blurriness, I will send them to get a dilated eye exam, which you should do every year anyway. So out of those 9 cases, and remember, there's hundreds of millions of people taking GLP-1 now. It is estimated that about 14% of the population in the US is taking a GLP-1. To me, that's an underestimation. It has to be way more than this. And you don't see a lot of case reports. And interestingly, other medications that have been associated with that NION, that ischemic optic nerve neuropathy, PDE5 inhibitors, things like Cialis and Viagra. I remember very well 3 years ago, there was a study that did the same thing. It showed that there may be an association with Viagra and Cialis with vision changes. And it was panic. Even the lawyers started saying, oh, maybe we can get some lawsuits there. It was again an association. Another medication that can be associated with this vision loss ischemic optic nerve neuropathy is intranasal vasoconstrictors, things that you use to alleviate your nasal congestion. There have been reports of association with visual trouble. So it's not just GLP-1. There's so many things that can cause that. So what I'm doing in my practice, the overwhelming studies are showing positive results long term. The visual issue is something we're going to keep an eye on. We're going to follow those 9 patients out of the hundred of millions utilizing this. I tell my patients that if you have any visual issues, to make sure you give me a call. Another issue is the possibility of thyroid cancer with GLP-1. And that's a big one because there's still a black box warning on GLP-1 that it may increase the risk of a very rare form of thyroid cancer called medullary thyroid carcinoma. It's an extremely rare cancer. Same thing. There was a recent report and those reports are retrospective study. They just look at large database. They see patients who've taken GLP-1 and they've seen if they're an association with any kind of, for example, thyroid cancer. So there was one study that showed that there was an increase up to 58% of that very rare cancer to increase in patients doing GLP-1. But then there was another study that was done before that where they looked at almost 250,000 medical records of people taking GLP-1, and they did not see an increase in thyroid cancer. So the jury's still out, and we think that now that patients are taking GLP-1, they're going to do more thyroid ultrasounds and we're doing more biopsies and we're finding more thyroid cancer because they may have been there from the beginning. There's more of an emphasis in diagnosing them. Thyroid cancer remains a very rare type of cancer that's very treatable. So the jury's still out on what is the risk of thyroid cancer with GLP-1. And what I tell to really a lot of the detractors is where were those discussions in 2010, 2012, 2015, where I was using GLP-1 on my patients for years and there were never those questions? So 20 years of experience, and we've never seen that there's a significant increase in those issues. But that same study that looked at this also saw that there was a decrease in 42 different conditions with the use of GLP-1. Things like Alzheimer's disease or neurodegenerative disease decreased almost by 40%. We already know that with the SELECT trial made GLP-1 became FDA approved to decrease heart disease, that there's a 20% decrease in cardiovascular disease, major adverse cardiovascular events with GLP-1. So let me do a little exercise with you right now, Stephen. So in the USA, there's about 700,000 deaths that are attributed to cardiac disease every year. And if we apply that SELECT trial, which was a really, really well-designed trial, double placebo-controlled trial that showed 20% reduction of death. So if there's 700,000 deaths a year, and you would put all of those patients on GLP-1, you would save 140,000 lives a year. Again, this is an oversimplification of health. But if those patients who are at high risk for heart disease were taking GLP-1, we would see a significant improvement in their health and decrease in cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. Now, could those patients, out of those 140,000 deaths that we saved, could there be one or two cases of optic neuropathy? We don't know because, again, optic neuropathy has been associated with all kinds of other medications. So I'm going to err in the side of we need to treat metabolic disease. And if you need a GLP-1, you should not be afraid of it because we have all these years of safety studies and all the benefits that it can have. We talked about this recently, that Zepbound, which is the brand name for tirzepatide, has been recently approved for treatment of obstructive sleep apnea. Not only because you lose a lot of weight with it, but they see that it decreases inflammation, especially redundant tissue around the neck and the nose, and improves sleep apnea. You have less apneic episodes. Sleep apnea is strongly associated with high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. So another indication. Another benefit I see of GLP-1 is for the improvement of metabolic associated liver disease, fatty liver. This is an epidemic that we're not talking about. About 20 to 30% of patients have fatty liver disease. And this, of course, obesity is a big risk factor, but I'm seeing a lot of patients who are slim, quote unquote, normal BMI, also with non-alcoholic associated liver disease. That is called now metabolic associated liver disease. So there is an issue with metabolic disease, and having that tool of GLP-1 and possibly testosterone plus GLP-1 to improve this is a pathway that should be celebrated. It should be celebrated. I'll still remember, again, I'm going to say how old I am. In the early 1990s, when we started using ACE inhibitors. So we discovered the pathway of ACE inhibitors, medication like lisinopril and ramipril to control blood pressure and decrease cardiovascular risk. It was a revolution in cardiovascular medicine because before we had mostly beta blockers and calcium channel blockers. Once we discovered the pathway of ACE inhibitor, we saved so many lives with it. Were there side effects associated with lisinopril and ramipril? Of course. And those have way higher risk of side effects. But since that time, they refined the molecule. The pathway of the ACE inhibitors was a successful discovery for cardiovascular disease. I would like the medical community to look at the GLP-1 pathway as a success that we found that GLP-1 doesn't just affect the stomach and the digestion, it works on our brain. It's a medication that can help with addiction and help decrease the neuroinflammation and the abnormal pathways that we see. Because I described something, Stephen, that patients who deal with metabolic issue or weight issues, they have a dysregulation of appetite physiology. That's a mouthful. Appetite physiology is complicated. We don't understand it exactly. It's a combination of ghrelin, leptin, sensation of stretch signals from the stomach, the reward center, the dopamine centers in the brain. All of this is involved to really help control appetite. Well, we just found that GLP-1 is a really important pathway for satiety and for metabolism. So we are in the infancy of GLP-1. It's only been 20 years. So imagine what's going to come in the future for GLP-1. We're going to keep refining it and we're going to find ways to help with this because we have to realize that patients who cannot lose weight, it's not because they don't have willpower. It's because they have a dysregulated appetite physiology. They know what they should do, they can't get there. If we can provide them tools to help them get there, then help them adopt new habits, this is the role of a physician or a provider to help their patients.